Have you ever met someone whose presence changes everything? Not a family member, not a lover. Just one person who somehow becomes the anchor of your life. Imagine meeting such a person in a hospital thousands of miles from home, a place cold, sterile, and filled with machines and alarms, yet somehow feeling a warmth you thought you'd forgotten. This is the story of Friedrich Keller, a wealthy German businessman who could purchase almost anything his heart desired, and of Malu, a Filipino nurse whose quiet strength would make him see life and himself in a way he never had before. At first glance, it might sound like an exaggeration. A billionaire willing to buy an entire hospital just to ensure a single nurse remains at his side. We are talking about a man who spent his life building empires in shipping, real estate, and technology. A man used to commanding rooms with his presence. Why would he care about one nurse from a small town in the Philippines? The story begins on a gray, snow-dusted morning in Munich. Outside, the world seemed frozen in winter. Inside the intensive care unit, machines hummed and beeped steadily, marking time. In one of the rooms lay Friedrich Keller, a man whose reputation preceded him. Known as stern, uncompromising, and notoriously difficult, he had little patience for small talk, for excuses, or for imperfection. To the nurses who entered his room, he was a challenge. He refused meals, disputed every treatment, snapped at doctors, and questioned every medicine. Many left feeling defeated, some even in tears. His family visited briefly, their conversations revolving around finances, legal matters, and corporate responsibilities. There was no warmth, no tenderness, only the heavy weight of a man who had everything money could buy, but could not control his own body. Then she arrived. Her name was Maria LSE, but everyone called her Malu. She was a Filipino nurse in her early 40s, far from her home in Leyte, Philippines. She had years of experience in Germany and was known for her composure, patience, and intuition. Unlike other nurses who tiptoed nervously past room 406, Malu approached it with quiet determination. The head nurse whispered to her one morning, "If anyone can handle him, it is you." Malu took the chart, offered a brief prayer under her breath, and walked into the room. Picture the scene. A woman far from home stepping into the room of a man who could command legions with a glance. She adjusted her uniform, knocked softly, and greeted him in calm English. "Good morning, Mr. Keller. I will be your nurse today." Friedrich's eyes, cold and wary, studied her for a long moment. "Another nurse," he muttered. "How many will they send me?" Malu did not flinch. She placed the chart down, checked his IV, and did something no one else had done in weeks. She pulled a chair closer, sat down, and looked him directly in the eyes. "You must be very tired," she said gently. "This must feel frustrating." For a man used to controlling everything, those words landed softly like a pebble in a still pond. Friedrich paused. Perhaps it was her accent. Perhaps it was the sincerity in her voice. Perhaps it was simply the fact that someone was acknowledging his exhaustion. Not just the physical kind, but the deeper, soul-weary kind. "You have no idea," he replied. "Maybe not," she said. "But I can listen if you want to tell me." For a full minute, the room fell silent, save for the rhythmic beeping of the machines. Then something extraordinary happened. Friedrich spoke. Not about his businesses, not about his wealth, not about his power. He spoke about fear, loneliness, and the dread of dying unseen, of being valued only for his bank account rather than his humanity. Malu listened. She asked small, gentle questions. She waited when he grew angry. She never judged. And when the conversation ended, it was with a simple, profound sentence. "You are still a person, Mr. Keller. Not just a patient, not just a billionaire. You are allowed to feel afraid." For Friedrich, this was a first. It was the smallest crack in a wall built over decades. And from that day forward, something began to change. Day by day, Friedrich looked forward not to his treatments, but to Malu. If her name appeared on the schedule, his shoulders relaxed. If it didn't, his mood darkened. The other nurses noticed, doctors noticed, even his daughter Elise noticed. "She listens, she prays. She does not treat me like a dying man," he remarked one evening. Malu's presence was slowly transforming him. He began to trust her, to rely on her, to let himself be seen in ways he had never allowed before. One snowy evening, as the lights dimmed and the world outside seemed frozen in quiet, Friedrich asked her a question that revealed the depth of her sacrifice. "Where are you from?" "From a small town in the Philippines," she replied. "Why would you leave home to care for strangers like me?" "Have you ever had to leave someone you love just to give them a better life?" she asked softly. Her words, calm and unwavering, carried the weight of countless sacrifices made quietly by Filipinos all over the world. Friedrich listened, unsettled yet inspired. For a man who had measured life in contracts, negotiations, and wealth, this was a new kind of strength. Quiet, patient, and selfless. As days turned to weeks, Friedrich's transformation became more apparent. He began to eat, to rest, to speak, to laugh quietly. He even began to pray. Elise, his daughter, noticed subtle shifts in his demeanor. Her father, once rigid and unyielding, was now softened by the presence of a nurse he respected, trusted, and cherished. But one morning, everything threatened to change. Malu's name was missing from the nurse assignment board. A new nurse entered room 406. "Sir, your nurse has been reassigned," she said timidly. Friedrich's chest tightened. "Reassigned?" The head nurse arrived moments later, professional and calm. "It is hospital policy, sir. She must rotate to another ward." Friedrich's voice, usually commanding, trembled with urgency. "Bring my daughter now." When Elise arrived, she found her father pale, trembling and clutching the assignment list. "Papa, what's happening?" she asked. "They removed her," he whispered. "They took her away from me." Elise tried to reason. "Papa, it's normal. Nurses rotate. She cannot stay forever." He shook his head. "She is not just a nurse. She is the only person who treats me like a human being." And in that moment, something remarkable happened. Friedrich, the man who could command empires and control boardrooms, declared with fierce intensity, "If the hospital will not give her back to me, I will buy the hospital." Elise froze. "Papa, that is—" "I can buy one hospital," he interrupted, his voice steady. "I do not want to buy her. I want to keep the only connection I have to life." Malu was brought into the room briefly, allowed to check his vitals. The moment Friedrich saw her, all tension melted. He whispered her name almost reverently. "Malu." "I am still here," she said softly. "But you know I cannot stay forever. That is how hospitals work." "I will change the rules," he said, weakly but determined. And so, after discussions with Elise and the hospital administration, every form, every statement, every official step was completed. Malu would remain assigned to Friedrich for as long as his care required. And for the first time in decades, Friedrich understood what it meant to be truly cared for. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and wholly. With her by his side, he began to heal. He ate, he slept, he laughed, he prayed. He became human again in ways no medicine could achieve. Weeks later, the hospital director remarked to Malu, "We have never seen a recovery like this. You did more than medicine ever could." And Friedrich? He looked at her and said simply, "You saved my life." "God saved your life," she replied. "I only stood beside you while he did." The story spread quietly among the hospital staff. A billionaire had tried to buy a hospital just to keep one Filipino nurse. But the truth went deeper. Some people change your health. Some people change your habits. But a rare few change your heart. And sometimes those people come from humble beginnings, from small towns, from places the world overlooks. They carry a light powerful enough to soften even the hardest souls. A light called compassion, a light called faith. A light called Filipino. Malu walked out of the hospital that evening. Snow brushed her face, but her heart was warm. She knew that somewhere inside, a man who had believed he could buy anything had finally learned the one truth money can never purchase. The presence of someone who truly cares. And sometimes, without planning it, without realizing it, you become the miracle someone has been waiting for. Have you ever met someone like Malu? Someone whose quiet strength changed your life even in the smallest way? If her story touched you, share it with the world. Let more people discover the power of Filipino compassion, courage, and faith.